and welcome to Classic Cars. I'm Sarah Matravers and once again we'll be bringing you the best of classic motoring from around the south. So let's take a look at what's coming up in today's programme. We travel to East Sussex to meet a man with a car for every day of the week. We spend a day in Hampshire in the splendid surroundings of the Bremer House Motor Show. In Classic Owner, we meet Michael Rogers from New Romney in Kent, driving his 1927 Austin 7 Chummy. And motor racing expert Simon Taylor looks at the wacky world of 50s special cars. It's Monday morning and the working week has started. For Fred Parker from Uckfield in East Sussex, it begins with a journey in his 1961 Isetta bubble car. Tuesday morning comes, but today Fred decides to travel in his 1968 Renault 10. Wednesday morning, and his second Renault 10 gets a drive out. On Thursday, a 1968 Renault Caravelle is his chosen vehicle. And on Friday, his 1956 Metropolitan takes to the road. The weekend arrives and Fred is spoilt for choice and takes his Porsche. You really do have one for every day of the week, don't you?
Yeah.
How did it all get started?
Well, it started about 6 years ago when I bought the first Renault, which was the red one. My first car had been a Renault 10 and I thought it'd be quite nice to sort of buy another one because I'd got the space. So I looked around and found the red car in Brighton. It had belonged to a lady who'd had it for over 20 years. It had done 20,000 miles, so it hadn't done very much.
Goodness. How soon after that then did the second one arrive? And
well,
how did that happen?
The idea was to have a second one for spares, and I found that one, which was originally green, and brought it home. And of course it was too good condition to use for spares, so that became part of the collection as well.
That was number two.
That was number two. There was a slight pause after that. We'd had some relatives who had a Caravelle. I'd always fancied the Caravelle, so I put a note in the magazine, and I was rung by a farmer from Essex who had it from new. He bought it at the 1968 Motor Show, so I went and had a look. It was quite good condition. He kept it in a barn, so it had been covered up. It wasn't too
nice
rusty.
And dry.
That's right. So that was it. That was number three.
Yeah.
The Metropolitan was something that I'd always liked sort of from way back when I was sort of a child, and it had been brought back from America, totally gutted and resprayed. The person who did it was a dealer, but I think he'd spent more doing it than he got back for it. And the Porsche I'd had before, so that
Right.
that was the original one really. The bubble car.
That's the most recent,
that's
isn't it?
The most recent. Yes, the bubble car. We went to the Enfield pageant of motoring, and I did what you shouldn't do, which was
Took your checkbook.
well, yes. And I'd got Benjamin and Thomas with me, and we'd been saving up for a fence. So I said, do you think I'd be in a lot of trouble if I used the fence fund for the bubble car?
No, Daddy.
And, well, they were quite enthusiastic. So that was that. That has a 300cc engine.
Now, having all these lovely cars, it must be difficult then to say that you've got a favourite, or do you?
That is very difficult.
Is it?
Yeah, it is difficult. I like the Metropolitan because it's got a lot of character, and even though it's only sort of 10 years older than the Renaults, it's really is a world apart. The Metropolitan was made by Austin, mainly for sale in America. They started off badged over there as Hudson's and later as Nash. It never had an Austin badge on it, so it does create some confusion when people see it at car shows. They say, what is it? I think the most common question is, does it float? Because they confuse it with the Amphi car. The answer is no, it wouldn't float.
Do they take up a lot of money?
Not really, no. They're all tax-free, apart from the Porsche, which is only 10 years old. The insurance works out at between £35 and £40 a car.
Goodness.
Which is quite good.
That's really cheap, yeah?
It is. Well, they're all on one policy, and they're limited to, I think, 2,500 miles a year each. So
Got so many of them, you're not going to do that much mileage in each one.
So as long as nothing major goes wrong, and I do all the routine servicing myself, it's really only a few £100 a year.
Deep in the heart of the New Forest in Hampshire sits an unspoilt Elizabethan manor house in the village of Bremer. The setting provides an amazing backdrop to a gathering of classic vehicles for their annual Bremer House Motor Show. Now in its 7th year, this is a popular show for classic car exhibitors and public alike. Hundreds of enthusiasts convene to admire the surroundings and the classic vehicles on display. Proving that they don't make them like they used to is Derek Ancona with his 1925 3-litre Bentley, a car he's used for almost every occasion.
I had it for 43 years. It was our first car. Proposed to my wife in it, went on honeymoon with it, collected our firstborn from the hospital. Most reliable old girl. Not, I'm afraid, very smart, because my sons are used to polish it, have grown up and left home. And I don't seem to have the enthusiasm for Brasso as I used to have. There we are. It's a 3-litre engine, 4 valves to each cylinder, twin ignition, overhead camshaft, complete double braking system. The handbrake operates a completely different set of shoes on the rear wheels. It was the Porsche of its day, and still ambles along very happily, doing about 75 I can get out of it. The great thing about a Bentley is you can still drive it on the roads without embarrassing the rest of the motoring public. If you potter along doing 25 miles an hour, you're not likely to be very popular in these congested roads of ours.
An unusual make of car displaying here at Bremer is this Singer Vogue.
The car was supplied new to my father in 1966, and I took it over from him in 1987, just prior to his death. I laid it up for 5 years. I hadn't got the heart to sell it, and then I decided to actually get it back on the road. It had only done 42,000 miles when I took it over in 1987, and it's now done just under 55,000. I know of only one other actually in this area, but to the 2 Singer clubs, there's probably about 160, 170 Vogues of all the series known to them worldwide. So on the basis of if you double that number up for the ones that they aren't aware of, that's not very many Vogues out of a total production of 48,000.
Lining up among the vehicles is this 1957 Vauxhall, which has been driven down for the day from Somerset.
I've had it 10 years. 1992 I got it from a friend of mine who restored it in 1982. There's only about 50 of these left, and I've got one of them because I just like the style of the 50s. And I sold my Mini to buy this one. It's 3-speed column change, and it's very easy to drive. You can fit an overdrive to them if you need to. It's a 2262 engine, and it does about 30 miles to a gallon on a good day.
But it's not just the individual cars that are on display. A large number of motoring clubs also use this annual event to bring their members together.
We are the Reliance Scimitar Owners Club. It's a good club, and we are basically 2 branches. We are the Dorset Noggin and also Portsmouth Southants. We call them Noggins because obviously we go in the pub for a bevy once a month, yes. Yes, very good. That is known as the 1965 SE4 GT. It's a straight 6. It's a Ford Zephyr Zodiac engine. A Zephyr gearbox, and it's a very nice drive. It's a very nice, quiet drive. A bit noisy inside, but very light on the steering. And it's got 115 brake horsepower, so for the year it's pretty good. The one in the Union Jack is an SE5A. I've just nearly finished restoring it now. It was a very bad condition when I bought it. The bodywork was bad, interior not very good, but it was a good basis to get a nice car. As you can see, she's coming up very nice, looks very smart.
And at the other end of the scale sits the Jaguar E-Type.
Well, I've always liked E-Types, and in fact this one was a one-owner car before me, and we tracked it down and found it in Paris. And when we saw it, we thought, well, we've definitely got to have it, and we brought it back, and here she is. The look and the fact that it was way ahead of its time back in the 60s when I was a youngster, and I always wanted one then, and I could never afford a nice one then, so it had to be that when we saw this, we had to have it. It's a V12 5.3 litre engine, which likes its petrol, and it's still original and has never been touched, so it's a very good engine. Obviously we don't drive very fast over here, but theoretically it'll do well over 140 miles an hour without any problem at all.
Bremer House Motor Show is a small and personal event, and with a good selection of classic vehicles from every era, there's something for everyone. Welcome back. Still to come, we meet Michael Rogers from New Romney in Kent, driving his 1927 Austin 7 Chummy. And motor racing expert Simon Taylor looks at the wacky world of 50s special cars.
She's called a chummy for obvious reasons. She's very, very small, and when you're sitting there, you're right next door to the passenger. She was first registered in Berkshire in 1928, and she moved down to Frittenden in Kent, which is only about 20 miles away, in 1936. The gentleman that owned her then had stopped using her in the mid-50s when the Suez Crisis was on, and a lady in the same village bought her and restored her. She's so simple. She's just absolutely so simple and basic and quaint, and sort of goes from a bygone era when life was probably a bit more simpler. A 750cc side valve engine, very, very basic, magneto ignition, not a lot to her really. 2 years ago I completely rebuilt her because she was getting a little bit tender underneath and there's a few holes appearing, and completely rebuilt her every last nut and bolt. Last year we had her retrimmed inside and the new hood put on, and she's really about as good as I can get her at the moment. My brother-in-law, he's got a steel fabrication workshop, and so he was the man for the body work underneath. I could do all the mechanical side, and a colleague of mine painted her. I was relieved when she was back together, because when she's in part there was an expensive piece of machinery in a big pile of nuts and bolts and metal in the corner, and I was worried about that, but I was a little bit sad when I finished her because I enjoyed doing her so much. She's a bit of a handful with the modern traffic, with the brakes. The brakes aren't very good. They only work on the foot brake only works on the back wheel, and the handbrake works on the front. So she was okay in her period, but in the modern traffic can be a handful. It wanders an awful lot. You don't want to hold on to the wheel very tight, otherwise you wouldn't be able to keep her on the road. You've just got to relax with her and let her do what she wants within reason. It's a 3-speed gearbox, and there's no synchromesh at all, so it's a bit of an art changing gear, but you get used to it. And the main thing is to watch out for other traffic braking wise, because you haven't got a lot of braking time. I probably drive about 1,000 miles a year, and maybe a little bit less. We belong to a club, and we go out on runs with them, or I just use her at the weekends and go up the shops. We went on a London to Brighton one that they did especially for Austin 7s, and we drove up to London, stayed overnight, drove down from Crystal Palace down to Brighton and stayed overnight in Lewes and then drove home. And got a real buzz from that because she's actually going somewhere just rather than just round the corner. It's lovely.
In the 1950s, sports cars were for the rich. But if you had a couple of £100 and an old Ford 10 saloon, you could take it to bits, fit one of these plastic bodies and make yourself your own special sports car. Here at the Cotswolds Wildlife Park, a rare breed of cars have gathered. These are specials, and they attract a particularly dedicated bunch of enthusiasts. What's the fascination?
The uniqueness of them, really, and the fact that they've all been forgotten. Nobody knows about these cars. You know, even the slightly more popular ones like the Rochdales and Ashleys, hardly anyone remembers them. And those that do are so delighted when they see them.
One of which, of course, is a complete mystery car. Tell us about the Flying Pig.
Porcus volans. It has its own badge, unique badge on the front, with the legend in Latin on the front and an image of a flying pig. All aluminium body shell, coach built. No coach builder's plate on it anywhere. So really, it is a bit of a mystery.
Where did you find the car?
I found it in Alicante in Spain.
How long was the gap between it being laid up and actually getting its first MOT again?
Well, it seems to have last been on the road in 1966. The tax disc was actually with it, that was August 66. And it's definitely not been on the road since then. I picked it up in Alicante in April, brought it back, and worked on it on and off since, and it passed its MOT on Tuesday morning, managed to get the tax on Friday morning, and here we are.
Well, where's the magic of having a Ford Special or a Singer Special in your case?
You're not going to meet another one like it on the road. The people that tend to own them are usually interesting. They're sometimes just wacky, but quite frequently interesting. And it's just a technology that I'm happy with.
Now, you've driven your Special up here. What sort of a road car does it make?
If you're not in a rush, it's perfectly civilised. It's very easy to drive. If you want to go quickly, you can have some great fun at modest speeds going sideways on the old cross-ply tyres, and it makes a great noise, so you feel like you're racing, even though you're only doing 40, 50, 60, 70 top.
And it's been part of your life for nearly a quarter of a century now. Are you going to keep that car forever?
I can't possibly let it go. It's part of the family.
It seems that in the 50s, when these Specials were popular, an awful lot of them got sold and never got finished.
Well, that's how I came by this one, I think. Somebody bought it with all the good intentions and never got round to finishing it. And it passed through, I think, a couple of hands before I got it, and I was the one that decided to put it together.
And underneath that rather slinky aluminium shell, what are the mechanics?
Austin 7 Ruby, with a few modifications. Hydraulic brakes, independent front suspension, but the actual chassis is still an A-frame with quarter elliptic springs on the back, so that it still steers like an Austin 7.
Now, I think you went and found the man who originally manufactured these shells.
That's right, his name's on the manufacturer's plate on the door sill. So we went down to Sherborne and went into the local council office and said, could we find him? They knew him, they told me where to find him. We went to his house, we knocked on his door and he was still there, and he had photographs of the factory when he was building them, and we had a nice long chat. And Mrs. Hamlin was there as well, and she told us stories of when they were driving around in the original prototype, and was very pleased that we still had one and that there was one left. He was very proud of his workmanship.
But it isn't just private owners who are proud to display their cars. Bill Woodhouse created Tornado cars, and he's astonished to find that they're still popular today.
Well, I rather hoped they would last like vintage cars lasted in my day, because I got excited about Bugattis and Bentleys, and I hope that people were equally excited about Talisman, Fairhawks and all the rest. No, I'm delighted. I am a bit surprised because the enthusiasm is outstanding, absolutely outstanding. And the restorations that are taking place, and it's jolly hard work. I mean, having done this myself with a lot of help from a couple of very enthusiastic young students, the work involved is quite frightening. I don't think I'll do another one.
Eric Martin from Kent used to race this Tornado for Bill Woodhouse. Now he's reunited with it 42 years on. Is it a surprise to you that all these years later the cars are still cherished and looked after?
Oh, it was a shock of my life to come back to it all again, you know. All them years ago I thought, that's it, I walked away from it all, never thinking I'd see it again. But out of the blue, they had a 40th anniversary which I attended, and one of my sons come with me, and that was it. So he started buying them.
And in fact, I think this car was found in America, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. Yeah, this actual one, which I built myself, you know, for the firm, we raced it and we sold it to America, the firm, that is. And a couple of years back, we saw it on the internet, so we bought it back again, shipped it over to England.
How did it feel getting back inside it after 40 years?
It was just a shock it was, you know, when I went to the docks to pick it up, to see it, it was just amazing.
Well, I reckon Colin Chapman didn't have all the answers. Here at the Historic Specials Day, I've seen some real design ingenuity, and every one of these cars provides a unique driving experience.
Next time on Classic Cars, we're in Hellingley in East Sussex at the annual Festival of Transport. We search for a bargain at the Bewley Auto Jumble. Frank Wood from Kent takes a drive in his 1952 Austin A90 in classic owner. And motor racing expert Simon Taylor meets exotic car dealer Adrian Hamilton. Join us then. Bye-bye.